What's up guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to be going through embeddings. You'll be able to understand the basics of working with embeddings, what embeddings actually are, why they're important, and how do you generate embeddings and use it within your AI systems. Understanding everything you need to know on embeddings will be vital in your AI journey. You might think you don't really need them at the moment, but trust me, there's a time that you'll require to be using embeddings. So let's get right into it. So here I have a small presentation. Let's go through it so you'll be able to master embeddings. Okay, so what are embeddings to begin with? So think of an embedding like data. So data like words that have been converted into an array or list of numbers known as a vector. The vectors are used to measure similarity between words or statements. So think, for example, like two words, a dog and a puppy. In normal conversations, they tend to be used in similar contexts. Therefore, they are quite semantically similar. Therefore, if you are to plot those words in, let's say, a graph, they tend to be in similar, like really close to each other. Okay, and what determines their position on the graph is what we call a vector. So if you did mathematics, there's a time when you wanted to plot a point in a graph, you use something called a vector that has, let's say, its x value is, let's say, 3 and its y value is 2. Then you go and look at where x is 3 and y is 2, then you plot the point there. Okay, so that's a vector that has 2 dimensions. Okay, so let's look at a 2D graph. Okay, so look at this 2D graph over here. So there are several words plotted on it, but you can notice that dog and puppy are quite close to each other. Okay, also wolf is quite also close there, but dog and puppy are even closer. Okay, because they are semantically similar. By semantic, I mean the deeper meaning within the word. They tend to be used in close contexts during a normal human conversation. Okay, but you can see dog and coffee are quite far from each other, because in normal conversation they don't tend to be used in similar contexts. Okay, so this dog has its own vector, this puppy has its own vector that tells us that its position in this 2D graph is exactly this position, and the puppy is exactly this position. So when a couple of vectors are brought together, they are stored in something we call a vector database. So think of a vector database like a multi-dimensional graph that stores these words and enables us to measure how close these words are to each other semantically. Okay, so the reality is a vector database doesn't have 2 dimensions. Matter of fact, it has hundreds of dimensions. To be precise, 1536 dimensions. That is for Open AI embeddings. Okay, so you can see here, this is how a vector database looks like. It has multiple dimensions, so it's not just 2 dimensions. Okay, so what's the use of embeddings? Now that you understand what embeddings are, what are they used for? So one is to do search, where the results are ranked by the relevance to a query string. This is pretty common, for example, when you ask an AI a specific text, for example, a statement like where is the US located? So it will take that question, turn it into an embedding, then it goes through its database of text or statements, then checks, are there any text strings that are quite similar to what the user has asked. Then whatever statements it gets that are quite similar to the text the user has asked is brought back as the result of that search. Okay, so also embeddings are used for clustering, where text strings are grouped by similarity. So for example, you might be having like a huge database containing thousands and thousands of quotes, and you want to group the quotes. Let's say these quotes are for sports, these quotes are relationship quotes, these quotes are business quotes. You're able to group them together based on how similar they are to each other. So it's good for clustering. Another one is doing recommendations, and this I think is quite powerful, which personally I feel like is the most important aspect of embeddings, is doing recommendations. So where items with related text strings are recommended. This can be used, for example, when you have an e-commerce store and your e-commerce store sells, let's say, skincare products. The user asks, I'm looking for a skincare product that moisturizes and also can remove my pimples. You can be able to take that inquiry, turn it into an embedding, then check through all your products that you have. Also, those products have been turned into embeddings. Then you're able to check which product embeddings are quite similar to what the user has asked for. Then whatever products are obtained, they are sent back as the results of the recommendation. So it's very powerful. Think of e-commerce product recommendation. Even it can be real estate property recommendations. So if the user asks something like, I'm looking for a house in New Hampshire, US, and it has a pool and blah blah blah, whatever, it will take that inquiry, turn it into an embedding, then check all the properties that are in the database. Each of those properties have been turned also into embeddings. Then whatever properties seem quite similar to what the user has asked for is returned as the result of the recommendation. So embeddings are quite powerful. Now we know that, okay? Now let's create an embedding. It's quite simple. You'll be shocked how simple it is. So first of all, you'll create an Open AI account, get your API key enabling you to access the Open AI APIs, visit the embeddings documentation, make an API call to create an embedding, store the embedding somewhere, then do a search. Okay, so now let's go through this step by step. So first of all, create your Open AI account. I already have one, so create it, then log into your account. So I've logged into my account and I've gone to the embeddings documentation. On your side, if you just go and search Open AI Embeddings, it will take you there. Okay, so here you can see there are 3 embeddings models that we normally use. These are the most powerful ones. Okay, this and this. Okay, and they are the latest ones, but there's also another one that is not listed here. Okay, and you can see here these are the use cases of embeddings, but we've already touched on this. Here's how you get embeddings. Okay, so we need to make an API call to this specific endpoint. Okay, it's quite simple. Just take this, then we'll use Postman to do this API call. Okay, so I'll open my Postman, then here I'll paste in the endpoint URL that OpenAI has given us. So let me grab it as is. Okay, come and paste it in here. Okay, then it's saying this is a post request, so we need to have it content type application/JSON. Then we pass in our API key over here for authorization. So I'll come here, turn this into a post request, then I go to authorization, then I pick bearer because it's a bearer token. Then here I paste in my API key. So to get your API key, let me show you. We'll go back here to OpenAI's website. Then I'll go to my dashboard. Then API keys. Then I'll click View User API Keys. Then I'll create new secret key. Give it a name. Whatever name you'll decide to give it. Then it's generated. Copy it. Go back and paste it in there. Okay. Then here in headers, we want to have content type application/JSON. Then in the body is where we pass in the text that we want to embed. So I'll click raw. It will be a raw JSON. Then I pass in here some arguments. Okay, so you can see here in the OpenAI documentation, it needs us to pass in 2 things. One is the text that we want to embed, then the model, the embeddings model we want to use. Okay, so there are different models that can be used to generate OpenAI embeddings. We can be able to use this at the moment. Okay, so we can even copy this entirety as is, come back here to Postman and paste it in there. Okay, so the input, let's pass in our text here, something like hello world. Then we'll use that model. Then we'll make a request, send the request and see what it brings back. There you have it. So it gives us a dictionary and the embedding is over here. So let me just expand this so that we can see it clearly. Okay, so you can see it there. This is the actual embedding. So you can see it's an array of numbers, or rather a list of numbers known as a vector, and you can see it has multiple dimensions. As I told you, 1536 to be exact. So it's quite long. Okay, so this is the embedding that we get. Okay, so OpenAI gives us a way of generating the embeddings, but not a way to store them. Okay, so let's see how we can practically use this. So create the embedding and store it somewhere so that we can perform a search. For this, I've gone ahead and created some APIs so that we can work with this. So let me show you. So here I'm using Project IDX, which is like a competitor to Visual Studio Code, just that it hosts your code online. Okay, so it's also like a competitor to Replit, if you're familiar with that. So we can be able to run our code online for free. So here I went ahead and created a workspace, a project that we can work with. So let's open it. And also don't worry, I'll have all this code available in my GitHub, link in the description so that you can follow along. So here in this folder we have our virtual environment containing our Python packages, but within this my site folder is where all the necessary files are. So let's run the server. So I'll open the terminal. You can see the virtual environment has already been activated. Then I'll go into the my site folder. Then I'll just do run the server. There you go. Then let me show you the actual API. So here in the views.py file. So let me minimize the side panel over here. Then explain what's happening. So we have two APIs over here. There's this first one to create the embeddings. Then we have this next one to perform the search. Okay, so the API to create the embedding is there. Okay, and we're using the Django REST framework to be able to handle this. So first of all, you'll need to install that. You'll just go on your side, open a new terminal. So you'll do pip install Django REST framework, Open AI, pandas, and requests. Okay, so this is to make the API calls. This is to be able to handle the CSV. So we'll be storing the embeddings in a CSV file. So this enables us to read the contents of the CSV. This enables us to create the embeddings without having to make an API call. So there are two ways you can do that. It's making an API call or using the Open AI Python package. Then this enables us to create the APIs. Okay, so you'll go ahead and click enter, but I've already installed this, so we don't need to do that again. So here in this embedding, so this is a get request because we'll be creating the embeddings for a CSV file we already have on file. So the CSV file is this one. So it's actually a simple spreadsheet. So you can see it has one column. The column header is text, and the following the text that we want to embed. So you can see we want to embed a cat, cap, the statement I love cats. Like you can actually even embed an entire book. Like you can embed such huge text that has thousands and thousands of words to that single vector of 1536 dimensions. So there's no limit to what you can embed. That's the best part. So what we'll go and do is just save this as a CSV. So but we've already saved it. So on your side, go ahead and save this. I saved it to my downloads. Then save it as a CSV, comma delimited. Okay, so I'll save that. Then I went ahead and inserted it. So just dragging it from over here into my folder over here. So embeddings.csv. So let's do that. So I'll first delete this one that we already had. Okay, then let me minimize this and insert embeddings.csv there. Okay, so there you see text, I love cats, and all that. So it's a CSV. Now that we have that in place, let me just minimize this. So let me explain this line for line. So first of all, we want to get the path to our base directory, which is the one that's containing this file views.py. Then we want to be able to get the exact path to the embeddings.csv. Okay, so this gives us the path to the parent directory, which is the API folder over here. So let me just show you. This is the API folder, parent directory. Then we want to get the path to this embeddings.csv. So this line over here gets that for us. Okay, then we want to obtain and read the contents of the CSV and save it to something we call a data frame. Okay, so we are using pandas over here, which we have already imported up here. So you're seeing import pandas as PD, and pandas is a Python library that enables us to work with CSVs or data frames very well. Okay, so this I use to just print the data frame itself and see what columns are within the data frame itself. In this case, we only have the text column. Also critical over here, during this line I set index call to false. Why am I putting this in place? Because it really disturbed me. Initially I had index call as 0 over here. Index call is like telling pandas that the first column is the index column containing, let's say, the index of that specific record or the primary key, so that when we list the columns that are on this CSV, the first column is by default ignored because it's the index column. Okay, but since in this case our first column is not the index column, it is critical that I set it to index is equal to false, or I just leave this out entirely. So I'm just telling you this because it really disturbed me. Okay, then this code is the one that creates the embeddings. Okay, so we're going to create a new column called embedding within our CSV file. Then we'll generate an embedding from the contents of the text column. So this is the text column. Each value in that text column, we need to apply a specific function. Okay, so that function is create embeddings, and this function we're importing it from another file called functions.py, which you can see here. So from .functions import create embeddings and that. So let me go to the functions.py so that you can look into that. So this is the function that handles that, create embedding. It takes in a query and some keyword arguments. Then first of all, it removes any line breaks from it and exchanges it for an empty space. Then here is where we generate the actual embedding. So there are two ways, as I mentioned. You can see there are two functions here, create embeddings and create embeddings too. This is the quick and simple way of doing it. You're just using the Open AI package that we installed. So you can see here we import Open AI, then we set our API key here. I've covered mine, but on your side ensure you have it there, or even better, I advise you store it in an environment variable so that you can just import it here, like os.environ.get that specific API key. Then you set inside this OpenAI, so OpenAI.API key, you insert your OpenAI key. Then here is where we'll use it. So OpenAI.embeddings.create, so you will create an embedding using the input statement that you have gotten, which is gotten from this query that we are is one of the parameters. Then the model we want to use is that. Okay, then we want to return the response dot data. We want to access the first record and get the embedding itself. So you can notice when we made the API call, it's just quite similar. You can see we needed the input and the model. That's all we needed, and to insert our API key. So this is just a quicker version of doing that. Another option is just doing the traditional way. You can see it here. We get the query that we want to embed, just like above. Then we insert our embeddings URL, just like the endpoint given by OpenAI's documentation. Then in the headers, we pass in our authorization, which is our API key. Tell it that the payload that will pass to the API is a form of JSON. Then the data that will pass, so this is the actual payload, is a JSON containing the model we want to work with and the input. So you're seeing you just need the model, the input, and the API key. Okay, then our endpoint URL to work with. Then we want to convert the data into a JSON string. So JSON.dumps does that for us. Then here's where we make the API call. So you can see now this is where the requests library comes in handy. So requests.post, so send a post request to this specific endpoint URL, then pass in our headers, then pass in our data, which is the JSON data that we've converted over here. Then get the response and return it back to where the request has been asked from. Okay, so there are two ways of doing that. Then this function, I'll touch on it a bit later. So going back to our views.py over here, so you're seeing here we're running create embeddings, then we're passing in the specific text that we're getting over here. So the text is being passed on to create embeddings for it to be embedded. So now, since we have created a new column called embedding within our data frame, and it has all those embeddings for each of those texts, we want to now insert the data frame back to the actual CSV. Okay, so that's why you're saying data frame.toCSV. Then we want to pass the data frame to that specific CSV, which is in our file path, which is actually embeddings.csv. Then we just return a response of okay if everything was successful. Okay, so now let's do this practically. We'll just run this from Postman, and this API, we are hosting it on a specific URL. So if I go to my urls.py, you can see here I'm importing our APIs. Then the specific path of that URL is create embeddings, and when that path is called within the URL, we'll ignite this specific API. Okay, so that is critical. So I'll get this, go down here, so I'll open the terminal where we had run the actual server. Oh, there's an error here for .toCSV. Let me just go back, let's save it up, then let's see if the error is still there. Okay, error gone. So now that we have this, just come back here, you see development server at this, click control, then follow the link, okay, to open a new tab. So here you go. Don't worry about this error. Just want to copy this URL as is, then is what we'll use in our Postman. Okay, so come here to Postman, new tab. Okay, or rather we don't even need to use a new tab. Let's just use the initial. Then we want to come and paste in here, okay, that specific URL. Then we want to do /API, okay, /create_embeddings. If you can remember, that's the path to that specific API. Then in our authorization here, we won't pass in our API key over here, but what we'll pass in is our access token that we get from Project IDX. Okay, so back here at Project IDX, for you to be able to make an API call to whatever API you're hosting on this platform, you need to get your access token. So for that, come here to the file, then do Control-G, then you want to do right bracket, then you want to do IDX, then you, until you see here IDX generate access token, click on it. It generates it, then you copy it, okay, then done. Come back here to Postman and paste that token in there. Okay, now that's in place. We want to ensure this is a GET request because our API is a GET request. Okay, then we send the request. So there's an error. Let's look at the error. So it's saying key error text. So let's look at the error over here. So it's saying this doesn't exist when we open our embeddings file. So let's look at that. Oh yeah, so you're seeing here our text is actually case sensitive, so this has to be a capital letter starting with. So let's go back to our views.py. Then we want to convert this into text with a capital letter, then save this. Okay, Control S until you see the server reloading. So that's in place. This should work. Let's run the request again, and there you have it. So you're seeing response of okay. Then if you go back to our IDX, open the embeddings, you see our embeddings now have been attached to the CSV itself. So each string has its embedding. So you're seeing I love cats, and that's the embedding of I love cats. It's quite long, as you know, 1536 is very long. But also in addition to that, it's added an initial column here. So you're seeing here, it's an empty column to represent the index, okay? And we're starting with the index. So the first statement of I love cats has index 0. But okay, you don't really need to know this. I'm just explaining what that means, okay? So now for searching through the embeddings itself, we will go through this next API that performs the search, okay? So in this case, this is a post request that takes in some data, which is the question that we want to search through our CSV. So we'll obtain it, then we will create an embedding of that specific question. So we'll pass that question to our create embeddings function that is in our functions.py. Then we can print it out just to see what's being brought back, but this is not really necessary, so I'll just hash it. Then we'll load the data set from embeddings.csv, just like how we were doing it initially. Then we want to read the contents of that CSV and insert it into our data frame variable. Access the actual embedding, okay? Want to access the actual embeddings column, okay? Then what you want to do is to get its actual value, okay? So this function, what it does is called literal eval, and I'm importing it up here. Okay, you're seeing from asked import literal eval, which literally means what it says, literal evaluation. So if it's an array of numbers, it could be in a string field, but we want to get it from a Python standpoint, we want to get the exact value it is. So it's literal evaluation from a Python standpoint, okay? So we want to get that embedding into a Python object, then we want to convert it into a NumPy array, okay? So if you don't have this specific line, you'll run into this error, okay? So I'm just telling you in advance, ensure you have this line, otherwise you'll run into this error. Because I was running into this error, I'm wondering, well, what's the issue? So, but I was able to fix it by inserting this line, okay? So then performing the search. So for this, we'll create a new column in our data frame and call it similarity, okay? Then what we'll do is we'll get the embedding column, then apply the function of cosine similarity. So this is actually the function that measures the distances between the two embeddings. If the distance are close to each other, means they are quite similar. So this is the function that does that, and we're getting this from functions.py, okay? So this is the function that does all the magic, being able to compute and check embedding to embedding. So the question embedding that's been generated versus the embedding of the texts we are searching through, are they close to each other? Then returns a score that you can be able to use. So for each of those text embeddings, they'll be compared to our question embedding. Then a score will be generated so that we can tell how similar are they to each other. Okay, so this function is the one that does that. So I'll go to functions, go to cosine similarity down here. So you can see it takes in two values which represents the two embeddings. Then it computes the score of how far apart they are from each other in the vector database. Okay, so then returns the score back to us. Okay, so that line does that. So you can see there we are passing in x. X is the actual text embedding from our CSV file. Then the next value is the question embedding that we generated up here. So you can remember here we have our embedding of the actual question that's coming in, and in this case it's not actually a question, it's just a text that we are sending from our API. Okay, so then we'll get our results. Then we want to sort the results of the similarity scores. We want to arrange them in descending order. So the highest score comes up first, then the lowest score comes in last. Okay, then we want to only get the three most similar texts. Okay, then we want to only get the text column from the results variable. Okay, so we'll list them according to the text that has the highest score in terms of similarity, but we don't want to return also the embeddings or the index, because you remember the CSV file now has three columns: the index, the text, and the embedding, but we only want to get back the text itself. Okay, then we'll return the response back to the API call, so we'll turn it into a list. Okay, so we can see the texts that are similar to it. So that's what this function does. Okay, so for this now let's run an API call from Postman. So I'll come back here to my URL. Instead of this, I'll show you we'll use search properties, because if I go back to my urls.py over here, this specific API, we are importing it from views.py over here. We want to get it through search text. Oh, not search properties, it's search text. Okay, so I'll copy that as is, go back here, then replace this. This is search text. No, search text. Okay, so that's in place. Then in this case, ensure this is a post request. Okay, because we're passing in some data and it's expecting some data. So if you go back to our API, search text is expecting one piece of data, which is a text. Okay, so let's pass it in. So instead of all this, let's have it as text. Okay, and the text we want to embed is, let's say, AI is awesome. So we will want to check which statements within our CSV are quite similar to this. Okay, so then let's send the request. Internal server error, so let's look at it. Oh, the same key error of text. So let's go down here to the actual API. Then let's transform this into text. So everywhere where we have text as a small capital letter, we want to ensure it's a capital letter. As a small, what's wrong with me? As a small, starting with a small case, we want to turn it into a capital letter. So I've run the API again, and you see these are the results. We can just run it again to confirm. You can see Open AI is awesome comes in first as most similar. Then that house is amazing, I love cats. So let's say, for example, we want to search for puppies. Okay, just puppies. So let's see. So you see, it first starts with a cat. I love cats, and it trained cats and dogs. Okay, let's say I want a good house. You can see that house is amazing comes first, then I love cats, then cat. Okay, so you're seeing how the most similar text is returned based on how the two embeddings are close to each other within the vector database. So this embedding that will be generated, I want a good house, and the embedding of that house is amazing, plotted within our multi-dimensional graph, are quite close to each other, because they tend to be used, the house word tend to be used in close contexts within a conversation. Okay, so they are quite semantically similar. Okay, so now you're able to see how we're able to work with this. So this is the basics of working with embeddings. You've been able to learn what embeddings are, what are the use cases of embeddings, and how do you generate embeddings and use them to make a search. Okay, so next videos in the near future, you'll see I'll go through working now with embeddings in a practical scenario of being able, let's say, to do real estate recommendations. So when a user asks a question of a specific house they want, you can be able to return matching properties based on their embeddings. We can also do the same thing for an e-commerce brand. So when a user asks a specific question, I want skincare products that does this and that, we use that question or the inquiry to bring back products that match what they are asking for via embeddings. So watch out for those videos coming in very soon. Anyways, that's it from me. If you want to work with our team to build such complex AI systems, there'll be a link in the description. Also, access to the actual code is in the description. Till next time, stay savvy. Peace.